It's been 20 years since Pokemon first came to the world and took it over. Now, since we've seen 7 generations of games and hundreds of adorable characters. I'm your host, as always, KMac Time, and today I want to take a look at the differences between Pokemon now and then. Now, it's obvious that today's Pokemon games are much different from the originals, and it would take hours to explain all of the subtle details that are completely different between the two. So let's just take a look at a handful of some of the bigger changes. The most obvious change is the perspective of the player. Now, starting out in red, blue, and yellow, we see a third-person 2D view of our character, and it has a classic RPG SNES kind of look to it. This continued for the first 5 generations, and in each game, the sprites got better, the animations got a little bit better, but it was in Gen 6 with X and Y games made the jump to the 3D world, which has since become the standard in Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and Sun and Moon. When you go back and play some of the original games in 2D, the sprites look flat and kind of boring by today's standard, especially red and blue. I mean, those sprites are just god-awful. They since fixed them in yellow and other generations. They fixed a lot of that. But now battling is just visually stunning more than ever. We get a full 3D model of our favorite pokes that are perfectly animated. Each attack has its own animation, and it's just great. At first, I was not a fan of moving into the 3D world, but after playing 3 games of it, I can't imagine playing Pokemon any other way. Yes, I still have fondness for the original 5 generations of games and their 2D style, but going forward, I hope they keep with the 3D, and the 2D is just kind of a throwback in older generations. Next, we have mechanics, and mechanics of Pokemon games have steadily gotten more and more complicated over the years. In the beginning, it was a simple case of rock, paper, scissors based on elements, and it made sense even to me as a young kid. Electricity is super effective against water, and other elements are super effective against that. It made sense. And while this obviously still plays a major role in the game, they've added in many other factors. Abilities were introduced in Generation 3, and they now play a major role in battling. A good ability can make the difference in battle, and in Gen 5 they even added in the rarer hidden abilities that are even more helpful, and most people seek out Pokemon with hidden abilities. And of course we have to mention the EVs and IVs. Now, it would take an entire video to explain these and how they work, and it can get pretty damn complicated even for experienced players. There's a lot of math that goes into this. Basically, these are hidden stats that Pokemon have that can raise or lower their specific attributes. IVs are determined randomly during encounters and can range from 0 to 31 in all categories. This has led to people taking advantage of another big part of the games, breeding. Breeding Pokemon and trying to get perfect IV versions of a Pokemon is pretty complicated, even if you do understand it. And it's still somewhat randomized, but this mechanic adds depth to the game, and trying to get a perfect IV Pokemon is well worth the struggle. Then we have EVs, which is another hidden stat that indicate the Pokemon's training. Defeating enemy Pokemon, eating vitamins, and going through super training, these are all ways to gain EVs. You have a much more control over EVs and IVs, but there are limitations upon them. Most notably, Pokemon are limited to 252 EVs per stat and 510 EVs across all 6 stats. Each Pokemon species you defeat grants between 1 and 3 EVs when defeated. Most Pokemon give EVs in the stat they excel in themselves. Weak, unevolved Pokemon typically give 1 EV, moderately strong Pokemon give 2, and legendary and other strong Pokemon give 3. If you wanted to raise your defense EV, for example, you would try to defeat a lot of Geodudes as they have great defense. If you wanted to raise your HP, you might want to try battling a lot of Gulpins. Mixing and matching what EVs you choose to raise, coupled with a good Pokemon that already has a good IV, can make for an extremely strong Pokemon, and the newer generations of Pokemon games really let you spend time trying to create and craft the perfect Pokemon, and it's actually something really cool that you just couldn't do in some of the older generations. Gen 6 also introduced the idea of a Mega Evolution mechanic, and in Gen 7 since introduced the Z move mechanic, both of which seem kind of gimmicky to me, but they do add a lot of battle strategies and make it a little more complex, and that's a good thing, as mashing the A button to defeat enemies can get kind of stale, especially after playing through this game so many times or playing through so many different generations of the game. I think it's good that the newer games are trying to keep things fresh and spice it up, and it's the best way to ensure fans stay engaged with the series throughout the future. Next, let's take a look at the storylines from past games and recent ones. The original had a simple premise to catch them all and be the very best. And while that is still very much the overarching goal of the newer generations, they've added in much more into the plot lines over the years. What was once a simple idea of getting all 8 badges and defeating the Elite Four has since turned into somewhat of a backseat to saving the world, time travel, outer space, different dimensions, and all other kinds of crazy out there things. And while I do enjoy the stories of the newer games, they can be a tad confusing to follow at times. It makes me kind of miss the days when the biggest plot twist was finding out that Giovanni was actually the 8th gym leader. Call me old-fashioned, but to me, Gen 1 will always be the best in terms of story. And of course, Team Rocket is infinitely cooler than the lame-ass teams that have come since, especially Team Skull. These wannabe wanksters in Sun and Moon are just so cringeworthy. Oh god, they're absolutely terrible. They don't even hold a candle to Team Rocket. And finally, we have to discuss the obvious biggest difference: the Pokemon themselves. Now, we started out with 151 and has since ballooned into over 720, I think, is it? 721, including the legendary that hasn't been released yet. And I'll always be biased and say that the originals were the best designed and the coolest, but let's be real here, guys. Geodude is a rock with hands, Voltorb is a Pokeball with eyes, and Ditto is just a pink blob. Like, what is that? They're not as great as the kind of nostalgia goggles would lead you to seem, and over the years they have introduced so many awesome and unique Pokemon, and I think Gen 7 has some of the best yet. I mean, take a look at some of these awesome Pokemon designs. Super cool, very colorful, very awesome Pokemon that I'm starting to really fall in love with. And the Hawaiian theme is perfect for a Pokemon game, and the design of the new Pokemon was spot on. Of course, each generation has a handful of Pokemon that are just forgettable or poorly executed, but for the most part, each time there's a new Pokemon in a new Pokedex, it makes me want to get out there and catch them all as soon as possible, and Gen 7 is no exception to this. Overall, Pokemon games have made some massive strides over the past 20 years, and it's amazing to see where the series has gone since the old days in Pallet Town. It's also amazing to me to see young kids today as excited about Pokemon as I was as a kid back in the mid-1990s. So cool to see kids still following up on this and the franchise going strong. Hopefully the franchise stays around for at least another 20 years and continues to grow at the pace that it is now. And maybe my kids can grow up playing Pokemon in Generation 10 or 15 or whatever that is. So that's very cool to see. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed. If you guys did, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. You guys hit that. Let's try and hit 500 likes. And subscribe for more Pokemon content in your sub box daily. Also, let me know what your favorite generation of Pokemon is. Mine clearly is biased towards Generation 1, as that is what I grew up with as a child. Today's code word you can leave in the comments down below is going to be Gary, like the original rival from Red, Blue, and Yellow. So leave his name in the comments down below, and I know you guys are some of the coolest subscribers on the entire internet. So let me see that comments in the comment section. But until next time, guys, remember it's always K-Mac time somewhere. Until then, take it easy, and peace out.